AppleBlossom, written and narrated by Eloisa Hernandez. Chapter 2. You Can't Be Here. Maud left and arrived early the next morning, not relaying to where, of course, or for how long. The minute the unpainted wooden door swung open, I flew across the shop unfettered, hands reaching for the baskets. Maud, wide-eyed, became immobile, clutching the handle so tightly her fingers flexed. A few long strides across the faded-out wooden slats and passionately swatted me away. She heaved the baskets of contents onto the ancient stripped oak countertop, in the interior of the old shoe store where a register should have been. I ain't never seen so much food, I murmured half to myself and half to Maud, my eyes roving over the mound of delicious turnips, a cabbage, rolls of bread, 4 dented cans of vegetable soup, and best of all, a tiny bag of peppermint candy. I met my ex-boss crossing the street today near Parlor Street. He hired me back from my old job and gave me some bucks. Maud's typically colorless, stoic face had a full smile on, lighting up her sharp eyes and bringing out an exuberant, soft blush in the hollows of her cheeks. How old does I have to be get a job? As the counter was too tall, I stood on my tiptoes, breathless as I raised my hands above the baskets, wary to lay a finger on the sacred food. I provide money for the food, and it's gonna stay that way. She lowered herself to my level with a straight, stern face and placed her hand firmly on my shoulder. Her dark, amber, slanted oval eyes deepened, while her long, curled lashes shadowed her serious gaze. There was no draught of cool air anymore, as winter was over and summer had dawned, but nonetheless at her touch shivers snaked down my spine and cold brewed in my bones. I bobbed my head in obedience, fixing my attention back to the invaluable commodities as Maud straightened herself. I knew I would discover somehow if I was old enough to acquire a job. It'd be worth a risk anyway. I have something else. Maud gestured gracefully to the door that led out into a busy sidewalk. Scanning outside the pane of clear glass that peeked out at the bustling city, I noted nothing peculiar. I don't see it. Starting towards the door in the resounding, dim-lit shop, Maud snappily caught me by my shoulders. Just wait, she snapped, pressing her iron-heavy yet thin hands into my shoulders, almost drilling me into the floor with her weighing hold. I always wondered how she could be so strong when she seemed so frail. As we stood motionless in the center of the front store, out popped a little head. The rectangular glass pane was scarcely large enough to view a head and shoulders. A wee boy peered in, no doubt standing on his tiptoes. I awoke from my astonished stupor, bewilderedly registering that Maud had loudly called him in. Gathering myself as if my guts had spilled, I observed as the boy timorously entered, cautiously opening and shutting the crooked door. I estimated he was no older than a tot of 5. His curly, sorrel-brown hair wisped over his forehead, framing his olive-colored skin. What stood out was his profound hazel eyes that seemed to remind you of all your faults, towing back residing guilt to the surface of her mind. Maud loosened her grip on my throbbing shoulders as he neared, giving me seconds to escape. Fidgety and constrained, I distanced myself between this incoming intruder. He had no right. Shame on him for taking my spot. The instant the little boy planted himself before Maud, where I had previously been, a floodgate of questions gushed from my mind out of my mouth. I angrily twitched in my thick gray dress, a boiling rage rising in my chest. "Lucy Montgomery, I'm speaking," Maud thundered. "'Tis rude to interrupt your elders. If you were to listen, I could explain." She raised her hand to strike me in the back of my head. I dodged out of her reach, becoming obedient, but commenced my seething. Ludicrous thoughts were deposited into my brain as Maud expounded on how she'd saved Louis. He was near being snatched up by an orphanage, but Maud, witnessing the circumstance, hastily intervened and informed them his mom was looking for him. They were undeniably relieved, since he was one extra costly child that they had to take care of. At Maud's simple convincing they departed, speeding off in a vehicle which had big white letters over the black that advertised Carla's orphanage. "Why daren't you let him take him to an orphanage?" I scowled, clenching my hands until my knuckles cracked, my tone of voice obviously annoying Maud more than ever. "What if I left you at an orphanage?" she haughtily responded sharply, startling the intruder, whose jittery eyes darted back and forth as we stared daggers. "You wouldn't have." I honestly believed Maud would never abandon me, not for a million years. We'd always be together. Ignoring me, she whipped out from her dingy gray dress's pocket a pack of beachy peppermint gum. Nonchalantly held it out to Louis, whose eyes lit up ebulliently at the treat. His grubby hands flashed out to snatch them just as fast as a grin spread on Maud's face. How dare she not give any to me, too? Indignation fumed in my chest, tightening up my throat with its bitter smoke. I spun around and raced to mine and Maud's bitsy, cramped room, face planted onto my mattress with a dreadful shriek which sounded as if I was being gruesomely murdered. "Lucy, there's someone at the door for you," Maud hollered from across the shop an hour later. Still, I had not budged from my musty bed, and Maud was pretending that all was normal, but the whole world had turned upside down. I jumped off the springy mattress in the colliginous room. It was the little boy I had invited. I visualized us engaging in a splendid good time. Then reality washed upon me, as I concluded we didn't possess a cake. I had forgotten to ask if we could get one. In relief, I recalled all the food she'd brought home. Though there was one problem. Louis. I dashed around the hall's corner while playing tag and ran smack dab into Louis. At first, he eyed me blankly, but as I glowered at him, scowling, he went howling to Maud, his feet smacking the flooring as he went. "You're just a big baby!" I hollered after him. "Who's a big baby?" questioned my guest, who stood to a stop beside me, breathless. I whirled around and bellowed, "Louis, you dunce!" "Sorry." My guest's lopsided, enthusiastic grin vanished. Guilt seized me for yelling. I quickly lifted my face in the best hostess smile and inquired if he would like to pick something to do, though it was my turn to choose a game. Before he could respond, Maud called us to eat as she was heading our way. The kitchen was around the corner. The peeled white paint was gone now. Only specks of it remained clinging to the wall for dear life. Stubborn little things they were. "Lucy, I warmed the soup up. You and little friend can eat. What's your name, lad?" Maud's petite figure came into sight as we set foot in the second brightest place in the shop. She wore her once white apron, which now was stained yellow and couldn't come out fully clean from washing. "Salvatore," he answered, anxiously tottering side to side and messing with his bony hands. "Though Miss Pentley calls me Salve." We impatiently stood in the airy kitchen, waiting for her to finish ladling the white porcelain bowls up with the canned soup. Her hair was done up in a loose, shiny chocolate bun at the nape of her neck. "Okay, Salve." Maud seemed to taste his name, as if ingraining it into her head. She turned and handed me a bowl before heading to where Louis sat quietly on a dirty blue torn blanket, giving Salve the one bowl that wasn't chipped, from behind. Salve jerked, startled, his body suddenly tensing. "You okay yet?" Maud was spooked. What? Yeah, I'm okay." We all ate quietly for some reason after that. Something seemed off with Sal for a moment. Very off. Perhaps he'd just been very hungry, though. I patted my stomach softly and sighed. For the first time, in a long time, I was full. Maud, who's older, me or Sal? My eyes narrowed as I stared hard into Maud's. She skirted my eyes and observed Salve, her hands on her hips, chewing her bottom lip. Do you know how old you are? Maud untied her apron and hung it on a nail driven into the wall's wood to the right. I turned 7, he answered, holding his sunburnt hands up to show Maud he was 7. Louis, as he had been doing, listened without a peep, his mysterious eyes fixed on each individual as they conversed. It's October now, so your birthday's in May. Maud spoke in a hushed tone, perhaps to herself. Lucy, stand next to Salve. Maud frowned as I circled way around Louis, who was clinging onto her dress, all the while vigilantly peering at me. Maud sized us both up and gave her reply. Lucy, you're about a oak's leaf taller. You might be going on to your 9th birthday. I gleefully clapped my hands, jumping up and down, chanting, I'm older, I'm older. Maud sighed and went back to scraping the leftover soup out of the bowls we'd eaten into a large tin bucket. It was normal to see her scrape off food and sauce from plates and bowls. Sometimes on Sundays she would wash the dishes. This past year, I noticed Maud would wash the dishes in the middle of the week also. That day, Louis hung onto Maud like she was his beloved mother. It annoyed me so much I wanted to snatch him up and give him a good swat in the behind and send him back out into the street. I dared even go up to Maud without having to endure those eyes looking into my very soul. I despised Maud for bringing him to our house. He didn't belong here. He had no right to be here. It's not his home. The voice shrieked inside my head. The worst part of it was, Maud seemed to enjoy him following her everywhere she went. After a while, I was able to avoid Louis completely. The problem was, Salve seemed to fancy the little boy. He invited him to play, to which I stared icily at Louis till he saw me, and even though he saw me, I still glared. Thank goodness, he stuck his thumb in his mouth and shook his head so violently I thought it would pop right off like a soda can cap. Every chance I got, I would also make faces at Maud, till she ordered me to go play and stop looking at her, asking sarcastically, Am I so amazing to look at you can't take your eyes off me? I smirked at Maud mischievously. Yes, but not beautiful. Just so ugly I daren't believe my eyes, eh? At that, I booked down the hall at full speed, sure Maud was going to grab the broom and start chasing me with it. But when I glanced back, she was giving Louis a little purple glass marble. Salve, at my heels, was unsure how to react to my treatment of Louis, who I knew everyone knew I hated. Is he your brother? Salve asked, nodding toward Louis fondly. No, and I hope he never will be, I retorted irritably. After I said it, I realized I had spoken too sharply. That's too bad. Salve shook his head side to side and tisked. I studied the little figure, clinging to Maud's dress. Feeling of pity washed over me. I reminisced of my own lonesome emotions to the world when I had been abandoned. How I too had been rescued by a kind-hearted girl, and how dear I loved her now. Just like him, deep down I was afraid Maud would disappear like my parents did, and I would be alone again. Did he feel the same? I quickly dismissed the thought, telling myself he had no right to barge into my life and take away my best friend. But Lucy did not know it. Her shell had given way just a bit, though it would be a very long time till she would call him brother.